All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a gravy fireside chat around art collecting and investing. We have a lot of folks excited about this talk. Thank you for joining and taking the time to join us for this conversation. My name is Brandon Jones. I am the founder and president, I guess, of Gravy. Gravy is a community that was put together to really drive transparency, access, and understanding around what it takes to build wealth, specifically focused on diverse populations, but open to anyone who is aligned with that mission. Right now, we are a community that exists on Slack. We also have a newsletter, email newsletter we send out. We have an investment group. If you recently followed us on LinkedIn, you saw that we structured a group of investors for a Harvard development deal happening in Boston. It was on the Wall Street Journal. I think it came out yesterday. A number of NBA players jumped in that as well. So we have plenty of stuff coming. Lewis will talk about some interesting things happening on his end on the art front. But our goal is to really get folks connected to really high quality opportunities to invest in various asset classes. And then, excuse me, and then lastly, we have a number of conversations like this one as part of our conversation series as well. So we have incredible panelists, but before we get into the panelists, I want to introduce an incredible lady who is going to co-moderate this. We're doing this event in collaboration with Black in Home. It is a great platform that showcases really the art and interior design of folks in the African diaspora. I came across the IG page and it was one of the best ones I've seen in a really long time. So kicking it over to Stephanie Alexis, who's co-moderating this. Stephanie, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Brandon. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie. As Brandon said, I've co-founded Black and Home with my sister, and that's BLK and Home. And so follow us on Instagram. It's a page we started as a result of being at home during the pandemic and wanting to be inspired to enhance where we lived. And so we were looking at various inspo, and there was just a lack of representation. So as a result, we saw that empty space and stepped in and said, we want to showcase and celebrate how Black people live. And that's from interior design to decor to art, cooking, hosting, self-care, and so much more. So please check us out and join the family over on Instagram.
Awesome. Definitely check that out. Next, I want to introduce two esteemed panelists that have taken the time out of their busy schedule to join us and drop some gems around art collecting, and their experiences. First, I would like to introduce Melanie Edmunds, who is a classmate of mine from Howard University. She is right now the Associate Director of Second Market Galleries at Artsy, and she's the founding director of M. Edmunds Associates, a full-scale art advisory and consulting company specializing in modern and contemporary art of the African diaspora. Melanie received her BBA in business marketing and master's in art history from Howard. Through her extensive career in business and the visual arts, she's managed projects ranging from fine arts acquisitions to art fair exhibitions and public art education programs. She's worked at the intersection of art and technology for nearly a decade, and she's a frequent presenter on the subject of collecting art in the online market. She has worked for the High Museum of Art, the Smithsonian Art Museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and before rejoining Artsy in 2020, she served as the first ever head of art experiences at Airbnb. Welcome, Melanie. We are really grateful to have you join us. Next, we're going to turn over to another really esteemed person that I respect tremendously, Mr. Louis Long. Louis Long is the owner of the Long Gallery Harlem, a contemporary art gallery he founded in 2012. With this gallery, he's created an exhibition and monetization platform for underrepresented emerging artists that are often overlooked by more established New York galleries. His innovative programming and exhibitions has attracted local and national press and has resulted in the artists that he's presented landing in the collections of Princeton University, the Studio Museum in Harlem, as well as numerous private collections. Most recently, he assumed the role of Associate Director for External Affairs for the New Columbia University Wallach Art Gallery in West Harlem. Now, his resume is long. I want to touch on the 25 years of corporate experience he also had in sales and marketing leadership roles, from launching business for CoverGirl Cosmetics MicroStrategy Enterprise Software, Verizon Fios, ADT, Home Automation. And he also previously was a White House Fellow in the Office of Management and Budget, which I did not know. Lewis is a hitter. He's a member of the Resilience Education Chair. He's a Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity Arts and Culture Committee Chair, and he's on the Howard University Board of Trustees Art Committee. He's also a Howard alum and also a colleague of Harvard Business School, where he got his MBA. And I know most recently he was also nominated to run Harvard Business School's African Alumni Association. So Lewis is the man. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, Lewis. Really appreciate you. Now, without further ado, shall we? So I'm going to start with you, Melanie. Can you just give us maybe a 2-minute spiel on what exactly you do right now in your current role in secondary markets for Artsy?
Absolutely. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. And thank you to the Gravy community for having me. I'm really excited to engage in this very important discussion topic with you all this evening. So as you stated, Brandon, I currently serve as the Associate Director of what's called Secondary Market Dealers at Artsy, which is for those of you who may not know what Artsy is the leading destination for the discovery and acquisition of art online. We feature international galleries, museum collections, foundations, artist estates, art fairs, auctions, all in one place online. At Artsy, I lead an area of the business that's responsible for the growth of our secondary market dealer business segment. Secondary market dealers sell artwork that is particularly in high demand within the art market. So we want to ensure that their work is most visible and discoverable on our platform, and that we're making it easy for collectors to discover and buy that work directly on Artsy, whether that's through an inquiry sale where a collector connects directly with the gallery and builds a relationship with them through that sale, or through various auction channels, or through direct e-commerce on platform transactions. So managing the growth of that new business segment is something I'm very excited to be leading at Artsy.
Nice. Lewis, can you give us a quick spiel on what you do as a gallery owner?
Wow. The first thing I do is really try to identify new artists to actually promote through the primary market. And I like the fact that we're making this distinction early on for the audience, because for anyone that's new to this market space and is someone that might be trying to invest, understanding the dynamic between the primary market and the secondary market is absolutely essential. And so for my gallery, most of my activity has completely centered on primary market activity. And so that is identifying new artists. And at the moment, I'm really excited about an artist actually that's kind of that's experiencing a resurgence. I have an opening for him next week in my space. And that involves everything from managing the details of his installation and transport to actually marketing the exhibition as well as the work. And that is an artist by the name of Ron Norsworthy. I think he's in the audience this afternoon. And so that is on Saturday, June 12th from 2 to 5. And for Stephanie, you should take particular note, because this work that Ron has created is really about establishing your space as a person, as a Black person, as a Black space. And he will have items in my gallery that are focused on how you make this space a Black space. Because in many cases, as all the things we go through, we come home and the things that are in our home aren't necessarily created, inspired, or infused with the spirit of our ancestors, of our brethren. And so he's flipping that on his head by creating work, but also decor items and wallpaper that will just immerse you and saturate you. And not to get too deep into it already, but he created the Blackety wallpaper. And the Blackety wallpaper will be on sale so that when you get home and you've had a difficult day, like, your home will be your castle, and he dares anyone to appropriate it who's not Black, because you know what? They're going to be immersed and living in Blackety. So.
That is amazing. I have to attend that, and I need to see this wallpaper. So thank you, Lewis. I'll be following up to get all the details. Okay, so since we're all a family here, we want to get personal and understand your story and how you got your interest in art, and also like what made you want to build a whole career around art. Who wants to go first? Let's start with you, Melanie.
Loaded question, but I love that one. I'll start with what piqued my interest in art. I really think that it was family. Since we're all family, I'll talk about family a little bit. It was family that helped me sort of land in the position that I'm in right now. My mother's brother and her godmother, I think, really instilled a love and appreciation of African-American art in me in a very young age. So my mother's from Cincinnati. Her godmother lives in Cincinnati. I would spend many, many summers there visiting my family as a child. I would go to her home, and it was always filled with the most stunning paintings and sculptures and books on Black artists like Faith Ringgold and Romare Bearden. So as a very young age, I was sort of soaking up all of this knowledge and information, but also being really visually stimulated by the works that I was seeing on display in her home. So I can really trace my love of art, particularly my appreciation for Black art, back over 30 plus years. And I feel just really fortunate to have had that very early exposure, not only to, being taken to museums as a child, but also to, just being able to walk into someone's home and experience what it must feel like to live with art and the impact that makes in transforming your experience with not only Blackness, but creativity. And so it's certainly, informed a lot about who I am as a woman, what I value creatively, and obviously informed many aspects of my career. The second part of your question, Stephanie, is about deciding how I was going to create a career or start a career in art.
Yeah, how did you decide you wanted to center your career around art?
So I don't necessarily think that it was a decision for me. When I graduated from Howard University in 2004, I immediately jumped into a career in business working for a global insurance brokerage firm. And as you can obviously see where I am today, I think this is probably the farthest place from where I really belonged. I was living and working in Atlanta at the time, and in an attempt to sort of make myself feel some sense of peace, because I knew that what I wasn't doing was not bringing me any fulfillment. I would spend every single weekend of my, every spare moment that I had each weekend at the High Museum of Art, which is the local art museum in Atlanta. Phenomenal museum and permanent collection. If anyone on the call has ever had a chance to visit or is planning to go to Atlanta, it's someplace you definitely should spend some time. But in my spare time, I'd take art classes there. I'd go on guided tours. I would always pepper the docents with questions about the lack of Black art that was on view in the galleries. This is back in 2004. But one day I think I just knew inherently that I wanted to work there, and I wanted to build my career within this space that was transforming me and developing such an appreciation within me for art. And when I started down that path, I think I was really committed to the idea of building and one day maybe founding my own Black run art museum, so that I could potentially be the solution to the problem that I was seeing in terms of the lack of outreach by museums to the Black community and the lack of work on view within the galleries that were reflective of the community of people that the museum was there to serve. So at that point, that was 2007, I decided to return to Howard University to obtain my master's degree in art history. And from that point on, everything that I did, both my academic and research interests and my approach to business, were really sort of rooted in the experience of Black artists and the preservation of their work and what it means and the importance to share that work with community. So in 2009, in the height of the recession, I had finished my graduate degree and I moved to Los Angeles. And I set out to create my own business, work as an advisor to private art collectors who were intentionally, on my part, I was selecting people to work with who were really committed to acquiring the work of emerging Black artists and nurturing their careers. I recently relocated to Chicago, but only after spending the last 12 years working in Los Angeles and working exclusively with collectors of varying collecting experience levels to help them grow and maintain their collections of emerging and mid-career Black artists.
Wow, that's so inspiring. Rufus, let's hear your story.
Wow, there's so many parallels. I think I found a new good friend. We both, Melanie and I both had our undergraduate degrees in business. And so, just as with the case with Melanie, I would first say that this focus, this area, this career, second career of sorts for me, it found me. I didn't find it. People ask me all the time, did you always want to own an art gallery? No. Did you always know you were going to? No. Are you an artist? No. But what I do know from the seeds that were sown into me at an early stage, from my parents, from my grandparents, was an appreciation of culture, and particularly Black culture, and realizing at an early age, and I went to a school, like most people who, I went to a school where, I wasn't necessarily, I didn't have a lot of kids that look exactly like me. And so at early stage, and when I'd have projects, I always had to choose a Black author, a Black poet. If there were some visual items that had to be created, my mom was an artist of sorts of her, I didn't realize it at the time, but she could have been an installation artist. She would create these elaborate scenes for my projects, whether it be science or language art, where she would freehand cut, objects and items. And so my earliest appreciation for the visual aesthetic really came at home. And so that was nurtured by further exposure. We were talking early on, Howard University was an incredible influence. I had the pleasure of serving as the chief of staff to a former president who had a huge interest and passion in art. And one of his favorite pastimes in the afternoon was to either visit the art gallery at Howard, or to visit the Moreland Spin Garden gallery. And so in both cases, you just cannot avoid, being, kind of mesmerized and also transformed by seeing these images, and further being able to, I happened at the same time to buy a new home, and my home was around the corner from the legendary kind of grandmother of art at Howard, and for emerging artists in general, and that's Lois Mailou Jones. And so, my real estate agent was a caretaker, and she gifted me this book of catalog as a closing gift, the catalog for Lois Mailou Jones. And so it was those influences that actually led me. And my first pieces of work that I purchased, probably I purchased off the street, and they didn't have a huge dollar amount, but they had such a strong visual impact. So.
Wow, and I saw President Swigert is actually here in attendance. He just sent a note out, sending greetings from the Swigert. So welcome, welcome. We appreciate you supporting. That's an incredible story. So let's talk about it. I mean, look, the Gravy community is really about building transparency into wealth, right? Art is interesting in that it's something that you enjoy. You have to have a personal connection with. At the same time, art as an asset class is really growing. A lot of that is due to the fact that it's not really correlated strongly to the stock market, and it has somewhat of an ability to act as an inflation hedge. And so I'm wondering, how are you balancing like art as an investment versus art as something that is intended to really be enjoyed? And supporting an artist is really supporting their work and their artistry versus a flip, or looking at it from a money first perspective. So, Melanie, I guess I'll throw it to you. How should we be thinking about art? Should it be viewed as an asset class, as a passion, a little bit of both? How do you think about that? And how should we, as folks beginning to step into this world, be thinking about art?
So I'm going to start off by saying something that I personally don't think is controversial, but in some parts of the art world, it might be. And it's something that I've said to every client that I've ever worked with. And that is that, when you're buying art, first and foremost, you should love the work that you're buying. You should want to live with it. If you just want to buy and flip art, you should consider investing in the stock market or in Bitcoin, because art collectors have a responsibility. As an art collector, you are the steward of the work that you are buying, and you should be in relationship with the art. And whenever possible, you should be in relationship with the artist who made the work. So art in my opinion, and I believe Lewis, I will let him, touch on this as well, because I think he may share the same viewpoint. I don't think that art should be collected for the purpose of simply amassing objects, but really for the purpose and the intent of supporting and nurturing artists. So I would always encourage people, when you're thinking about buying art, think about buying something that you love. Think about something that you want to live with and enjoy over the course of your lifetime. Now, from an asset standpoint, I ended on the word lifetime for a reason. I think art is a wonderful, wonderful thing to buy and pass down from generation to generation, leave within your family. I think that art can be an incredible thing to bequeath to an institution. There are many, many institutions that need work by Black artists within their permanent collections to display and to share with the public, so that it is a responsibility to our community. We are constantly making sure that we are educating ourselves about the roots of our history and our culture, and that can absolutely happen through art. I think that, in my own personal experience, I've bought art that is certainly going to amass, that is going to increase in value and possibly amass wealth over time. Do I have any intention of selling that work? Not necessarily. I would love to be able to maybe give it to my children, have them give it to their grandchildren. What they do with it when I'm gone is not my business at that point. But I think that there's certainly opportunity for wealth building. I think there is an opportunity to buy work that will increase in value and be able to add that to our portfolio, and have your financial advisor say, this art adds to your net worth. But keep that art. Keep that net worth, keep it with yourself, keep it with your family. And if you're going to deaccession that work, do it in a way that is beneficial, not only to your community, but really, really, really do it in a way that is responsible to the artist and does not serve as a detriment to their career in any way.
Got it. Lewis, what would you add to that?
First of all, I completely agree. And what I will add is that, the first thing is, the beautiful thing about even investing in art, say for instance, you never make a dime of return on a work that you purchase. You can see work over my shoulder, right? And these are works that I just absolutely love. They're emerging artists, early in their career, and I get to enjoy them. I get a psychic return from these works every day. Every day. It's not like a stock certificate. It's not like a bond. It's not like any other asset that you hold. It's one that you actually live with and that you can enjoy, and you actually develop a relationship with it, with this work. And it has it really really makes an imprint on your spirit. And so what I will say though is that you can make aesthetic choices that you find pleasing, and you can enjoy those choices and the works that you secure as a result. But with just a little homework, with a little advice, you can make even smarter choices, aesthetic choices that have a greater chance of actually having a return. And that's why Melanie does what she does, and that's why I do what I do, is that I can help people make great choices. And what I would first say is, I would never suggest that anyone buys anything that doesn't resonate with them, that they don't like. I mean, there's work that I've seen in spaces 20 years ago that it still has an imprint on my mind, and I may not have bought that work, but I still remember that work. I see an image of it. It evokes an emotion. And that's kind of the beginning point, right? Because if you ever make a penny off of it, it's something that you really have enjoyed. Now, when you decide that, you know what, I'm going to start to spend a bit more on work, and I want to spend a bit more of my budget on work, then you got to kind of change your approach to that and say, first, does it pass the visual aesthetic approval test? One. And then two, now, okay, what are the aspects of value that might drive a work to have some monetary value greater than what I actually paid for it? And it's really not very different than almost anything else. But it requires a little work, and it requires advice. Who is the artist? Where did they study? What is their narrative? Do they talk about their work in a way that's compelling? And can they talk about their work? Who do they study? Who inspires them? What do they read? Can you believe that? What do they read? One of the collectors that was most instrumental in my journey the first question she would always ask me when I was, when I would present an artist to her is, where did they study and what do they read? And you might find that odd, but and I first want to temper the first question, because we all know that there are people who have natural talent and who can create great works, and it is not to exclude them by any stretch of the imagination, right? But that was her litmus test, one of her litmus tests. The other is, what do they read? And the reason why that is important to me is that, when you go beyond just the aesthetic appreciation of work and you start to really understand, kind of why this image was created, what does it reference? What is the artist seeking to communicate, or what does he want to evoke in you? And I'll give you a couple examples. I'll encourage anyone, if you're on your phone or you're have another device that you can do a quick search Sanford Biggers. Search Sanford Biggers and look at the installation that he did that's currently on view at Rockefeller Center. Like, this brother has taken over Rockefeller Center. And if you look at those images, just in isolation, without doing a bit more digging, it might mean very little to you. And I just had an amazing experience when I had a chance to see that work, and I wanted to see it without crowds. So I went early one Saturday morning about 2 weeks ago, and I was there and I was just admiring it. First of all, Sanford's a friend, and I know a lot about his practice. I've seen his trajectory of his career. And, I was talking to one of the security guards, and the security guard asked me, she says, a lot of people are coming to see this. And she's a Black woman, right? She says, but I don't get it. I went home last night and I showed my kids the picture, but I didn't really know, I didn't know what the big deal was. I was like, you don't know what the big deal is. So let's talk about this. Let's break it down for a second. I was like, first of all, do you see the pedestal that is the base of this work? And if you look at this image, you will see what looks like a Greco-Roman kind of the base of a Greco-Roman statue. There's Sanford. Thanks for pulling it up. You see the draping, so that it looks as if it's probably a figure from an ancient period. In most cases, these are cast in marble and they are not Black. But what Sanford has done is he's taken kind of the image or an amalgam of African masks and basically usurped and taken over that narrative of the Roman statue and placed a Black image. Like, that is pretty simple, right? But when I explained this to her, she was like, oh my God, that's what this is about? Yeah, this is about, an African mask being placed over these historic, we can't get away from these images. But what he's done is essentially usurped, and he's co-opted that image to put the Black or African mystique, the actual culture, into a narrative that we were never intended to be a part of. And so she was like, wow, I can go home now and tell my kids this story. Now it means something different to me. And so artists that have that level of insight as they create, and not only in the form in the ability of their hand to make, but also their ability to think through, issues and try to convey and really encourage the viewer to learn something they might not have otherwise known. Like, that is when you are really in the game and looking at buying work.
Wow.
That was like super insightful, and I wouldn't have been able to identify that without hearing it from an expert like you. So for people like me who are just getting started in this art game, what would you advise someone to get started? Like, what resources do you think would be useful? And any other tips to our many attendees on how to get started? That can go to either of you, whoever wants.
I think Melanie kind of set it up, right? She talked about when she first moved to Atlanta, she went to the High Museum. I don't know if the High Museum charges for admission, but I can imagine it probably is not greater than the price of a movie ticket. And so the point here is that there are things that you can do to start to really uh, activate your palate, so to speak, and in a very low cost way. And let me just say this too: go see work. Go see work as many places as you can. Go to galleries in your city. Go to, if you're in New York City or LA and Chicago, those are some of the hottest art markets right now. I would go to see works. Go to museums. I mean, Black artists are being featured in public institutions more so than ever. Julie Moretu is at the Whitney right now. There's a Grief and Grievances. I'm not sure if it's closed yet, at the New Museum in New York. But many institutions now have Black curators around the country. So I know the High Museum does, and the Getty does in LA, as well as the Richmond Contemporary Art Museum has a sister that's a curator from Howard University there. And all these institutions, Mass MoCA. So no matter where you live, there are institutions that have works by Black artists or not Black artists. You don't just have to, kind of season your palate with Black artists. Just go look at work and start to determine what you like, because this is the one thing I think Black audiences need to hear and know, is that these spaces are not typically populated by us, right? And so it's often that you can walk into these spaces. I mean, I see this, my space is in Harlem on 124th Street. I have Black people working there. I have Black work on the wall, and I have people come look in the window, and I ask them, come in, and they won't come in. I don't know if it's I don't know what the barrier is, but there is a barrier perceptually, emotionally, in a lot of cases, where not just a place that's accessible, but I'm saying you should feel entitled and empowered to go into Soho, into Lower East Side, if you're in New York, into Chelsea, and just explore. It is the cheapest date you can ever have. But in doing so, you start to really, kind of attune your eye and start to understand kind of what you appreciate. And that is the beginning of your journey.
About you, Melanie, do you have any resources that you can offer to our users?
I sure do. I think Lewis has an excellent point. I love what you said, Lewis, about, spending time in galleries and museums, and recognizing that even though those spaces historically have not been ones that necessarily were accessible to us, that we have a right to experience them and to exist within them as well. One of the things that I think is important to note, though, and I think I've learned this really in my time working in the tech space for Artsy, is that actually going into a museum, going into a gallery can actually, Lewis, you have a great example about someone walking up to the window but not wanting to walk inside the gallery. It can be terrifyingly intimidating for some people to go into a space that has always been synonymous with having to have a certain amount of knowledge or wealth to be able to walk into that space and engage in a meaningful way, and to be able to ask the right questions and have the right conversation. And sometimes people just don't feel like they're ready for that yet. So one of the things that I always share with collectors is that, particularly now that there's so much access to artists through social media, there's no better way to start to learn about an artist, particularly if you're thinking about collecting emerging art, than to maybe, if starting in a gallery doesn't feel like the right place for you, start with finding, an art program, like a Master's of Fine Art program in your city, at a local university or college. And every one of them will have what's called open studios. Every semester, they'll have an opportunity where you can walk in to those artist studios. And these are, sometimes college or graduate school students that are so eager to share their passion, to share their work with the world, to be able to explain to you what it is that inspires them and why they're creating the work that they're using in their process for creating. What an incredible opportunity to learn directly from an artist, than to go right into their studio and ask them the questions you've always wanted to ask an artist about making art. So I think that is a phenomenal way to sort of introduce yourself. Also, if there are artists that you're following and that you've fallen in love with, go on Instagram, find those artists, send them a direct message, introduce yourself to them. If they live in your city, some of them may not be represented by a gallery, and they may say, you know what, I'm open to selling my work right off the walls of my studio. Come on in, let's do a studio visit, get to know them. That's how you start to build a relationship with an artist whose work you can start collecting now for years to come. That artist may then become represented by a gallery. Now you've got a direct ticket right into that gallery to be able to build a relationship with them. Go to gallery openings, start to rub elbows with the people that are in that room, ask them questions, talk to them about how they started collecting art. You'd be amazed at the stories that you'd hear and where people started. Everybody thinks that in order to start collecting art, you have to be ready to buy that $20,000 piece right off of a gallery wall. That's not necessarily the case. Many of the most esteemed art collectors started out buying prints for $200 when they were in college. So don't ever allow yourself to be intimidated by the journey. It can seem like it's a space that is not meant for us, but it is growing. It is becoming more accessible. It's becoming more diverse. There's tremendous way for us to go in that regard, but there's certainly tremendous opportunity as well for us to plant ourselves within these spaces. The last thing that I'll say, and this is not necessarily like a plug for Artsy, but I do think that it is a really, really tremendous resource, because not only does it, allow you to, if you don't necessarily have the time or the money to go to an art fair, to go to an Art Basel, to go to a Frieze, to, bid on the work at auction, you're just sort of learning. It allows you to learn about auction results, learn how the auction market operates, read editorial coverage. It allows you to explore general art world news, just learn about art dealing, art collecting, what artists are doing in the market. It allows you to look at gallery exhibitions at galleries all around the world that you may never step foot inside. So it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. It encompasses all of this right in one place that you can go to and just read and learn and absorb all of that information and content and start to plan your sort of art collecting strategy based on what you might be learning and seeing.
Wow.
I want to add something to that too. So as we talk about these spaces that don't seem, accepting, like ignore it, go everywhere, right? But another space you made me think of, Melanie, particularly in the physical realm related to auction, is the auction houses. So Christie's, Sotheby's, Phillips, Swan. Before their auctions, there are two seasons. There's generally the spring and the fall auctions, and so generally before those auctions, the works or lots that are going to be placed up for sale are on view. And so you can go and see work. You could have probably gone to see the Kerry James Marshall that Diddy purchased for $22 million, a record number, for free, just if you had been following these auctions and going to see the preview before the actual auction. Like, don't be skittish about going into these spaces. Go in there with your head high, your chest up, and just like you own the space, like you're gonna write a check for the work. You don't have to do that. Just enjoy it.
Love that. Love that. So, all right, you helped us understand how important it is for us to just get out there, get comfortable in the space, understand what our own perspective, our view is, what resonates with us, having confidence, et cetera, et cetera. The next couple of questions are going to be around some of the dynamics that inform how art is priced. If you're looking to put money into art that you love, I think one of the things that a lot of folks may not really understand is the ecosystem, the structure of players in the art scene, and how is art valued. In kind of doing my research for a newsletter that Lewis provided a lot of insight, as well as Melanie, into. One of the things that was interesting was there can be a lot of gamesmanship for new players entering the market, right? In terms of either paying premiums, buyer premiums, or not having transparent information around something and its worth. Can you help break down for us who are the players and what are the dynamics for the art scene? And it's a broad question, but I guess you're the expert. So maybe Lewis, I'll start with you on this one, and then we can see if Melanie has anything else to add as a gallerist.
Okay, let's first talk about the sources and places where you can buy work. You can first buy works directly from artists, right? And Melanie touched on that, particularly ones that aren't represented. You can also find them at art school. That's a great place to become familiar and to buy direct. You can purchase at a gallery like mine. You can go online to online platforms like Artsy. And I gotta say, I want to give Artsy a shout out simply because of um, what I've seen as an evolution of being more representative and having more diverse representation, and evidenced by Melanie's presence and her significant role there, but also by the chief marketing officer Everett's role. The chief marketing officer of Artsy actually, started to collect art, would go into these spaces, didn't feel comfortable, and then, tried to figure out, he started a nonprofit that actually would help address that issue, and then became the CMO of Artsy. But and then also then going into the auction houses, in terms of the players are the places where you can buy, right? But there are other players that influence value. And so if you look at the New York Times, and it, there's a woman, if anyone's on Clubhouse, I encourage you. Her name is Alex Deloche, and Alex Deloche has a weekly wrap up on the New York Times art section. And so she will go through that every week. So that's a good source, right? And it's a great source of and an indication of who's getting press and ink, because that also tells you where there might be some energy and heat. Curators are a natural, very important entity and group of people, because they're deciding who's being actually placed on the walls of these institutions, and in many cases are signaling or providing whispers to collectors to say, you should look over here, go there. And then you also have the major institutions, which we've talked quite a bit about, the public institutions as key players. And so as a new collector, it's important to understand that the visibility of work and the artist, generally through traditional channels, is ultimately an indication of where there might be value. So if you don't think that Sanford Biggers is not a hot ticket now because he had one of the largest, kind of installations, he did a complete takeover. What I didn't say is you can see the work that's visible on Fifth Avenue. And that piece is just in front of where the Christmas tree generally is, right? And so if you're driving down Fifth Avenue, you don't even have to get out your car. You can see that work. But he has taken over public spaces throughout the complex. That has never happened before. And so when you see an artist, you see an announcement that an artist is about to have a public exhibition or some type of big show, that's just marketing. Bling, 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 bling. That means the money's about to go there, okay, in many cases. And so maybe you should be looking at the auction spaces to see, is there any of Sanford's work that's on Artsy right now for sale? Should I even, you can play at many different levels. There are prints out there for Sanford that you could buy. Or if there's a new artist coming to the High Museum, guess what? That means that artist is about to be on blast, and you should probably be looking at that artist as someone. If you like their work, then you know what? There's a good chance that you're going to get some value. And there's a question in the chat or that came in the Q&A, and someone said, "Well, why can't I just buy for a return purpose versus I can buy things, I can invest in things I don't like." It's like, we're not saying you can't do that. What we're saying is that because of just the range of works that's out there, you can do both. You can have both. And not to the exclusion, there might be sometimes that you might take an opportunistic purchase because you think there's some money there. Hey, go do it, have at it. But the point of the matter is that in this case, you can marry those interests.
Wow. So Lewis dropped a lot of gems there. Melanie, anything you would add on structure and dynamics specifically as relevant for someone who's just starting off?
What do you mean we say structure and dynamics?
I mean, like, who are the players, right? You got advisors, you have gallerists, you have, I would imagine you have the artists themselves, and then there may be brokers involved. I'm just kind of curious for folks that aren't in that world, what should we know about kind of what's happening behind the scenes?
Right. Good question. Thank you. So for clarifying that for me. So I think, Lewis gave a lot of insight. He even named the names of some really, important folks that are sort of spearheading a lot of the change that we see within diversity within the art world, that are really creating phenomenal opportunities for Black artists to be discovered, to have their work exhibited, written about, I think from a structural standpoint, though, you're right. There are plenty of there are not plenty of, there are certainly individuals whom, like myself, will serve as an advisor to private collectors. So there are some folks whom, I mean, if you read off a list of names, I think that for the most part, people can sort of, wherever you are in your market, sort of start to do a bit of research on. This is what I mentioned, going to galleries and sort of talking to people that are buying art there. You'd be surprised at how they'll share with you the names of the people that they're working with. But I think there's certainly benefit to, if you have the resources, working with an advisor, someone who can help guide you through the process of discovering artists, learning more about their practice, understanding the valuation of art, what the returns might be if that's what you're looking to gain from this, and understanding the best way to begin building an art collection. In addition to working with advisors, there are plenty of gallerists like Lewis, whom you can build relationships with as well. Going to their galleries, getting to know them, expressing genuine interest in their artists, spending time there over multiple months or years is the best way to develop those relationships. And I think that from the standpoint of working with brokers, I don't really think that that is something that most folks are doing these days. I think a lot of people are really sort of taking either the approach of collecting independently or working, like I said, with a consultant or an advisor who can help them sort of strategically develop their collection if they're not looking to sort of just, buy what they love and discover work on their own.
Got it. So I know Steph is going to open up for audience Q&A. So for those folks in the audience, please pop your questions in. We're going to pick those out. Want to ask a quick follow-up question, Mel, because a little bit of buzz around the idea of an advisor. Can you help folks understand how much does it cost? Will an advisor take you seriously if you're starting out? What are some of the best ways to find and engage with an advisor as a beginning investor, or excuse me, collector?
Yeah. So like I was saying, I mean, I think that there are, when I started out as an advisor, I used to kind of find clients through a few different channels. I was very fortunate when I moved to Los Angeles to be connected with a young woman. I was good friends with a young woman who at the time was an associate curator at the Studio Museum in Harlem. And her mother was one of the biggest art collectors in the US. I'm sure, Lewis, Joy Simmons. And so, Joy is like the fairy godmother of the Black art world. So she had dinner parties where she would invite all of her, friends that were Black collectors, and I would get invited to these parties and I get to meet people. So that's what I mean when I say going out and sort of starting to, not schmoozing, that's not the right word, but just inserting yourself and making your presence known is a fantastic way to begin to not only learn about how people are collecting and what they're buying and why and how they're moving in the art world, but they're going to be able to say, I have someone for you who's going to help you on this journey. And that's precisely what happened with me. I moved to a brand new city, and within a year, I had probably 25 or 30 clients that I was working with because someone who was a very serious collector had all of these other collectors around them that needed someone like me to help point them in the direction of the Black artists that they didn't have access to through other channels. So just building relationships is going to be the foundation of this, first off. I think that there are going to be people that are obviously going to advertise themselves, whether they're on, Clubhouse. Lewis mentioned Clubhouse, fantastic way to connect with people. They're absolutely doing this work. If you start tapping into talks on Clubhouse that are about art collecting, you will see people on the stage or in the audience that are going to be either asking questions or giving advice. Connect with those folks through social media, build relationships with them, because even if they're not in your market and can't work with you and take you to galleries, they might be able to work with you on a virtual basis where, you pay them a fee, whether it's a retainer or an hourly fee to go out and source work for you, or just present you with presentations of work you might be interested in. You can normally they will broker those deals for you so they can be paid. But that is a great way for you to connect with people and start to learn. These people will absolutely take you seriously if you are a novice collector. I know personally, I loved working with individuals that were passionate about collecting art and had a genuine interest in just learning and growing as art collectors over the years. And so if you can connect with someone whom is coming at it from a standpoint of helping you build something significant, helping you build something that you can be proud of throughout the course of your lifetime, then there should be no issue with the person wanting to take you on as a client, regardless of how much your net worth is or how much you know about art. They're going to help you get there.
Awesome.
Thank you. Good stuff. Let's open it up. Steph?
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. So we don't have a ton of time to answer everyone's questions, but Brandon will tell you how to get your answers via our Slack channel. But there are a ton of actions. So let's start. Once you are at the intermediate level of collecting, do you think it's more important to purchase works of more established artists, or would it be more advisable to purchase works of emerging artists? Stop there.
I'll jump in there. And I would liken this to, now if you're really, you've done the work, you know what you like, you've established some budgets in terms of where you're going to dedicate funds, then you wouldn't think about this any different than a portfolio, right? And so an investment portfolio. So you're going to have some startups in there, you're going to have some mid cap companies in there, and you're going to have some blue chip companies in there. And so I would liken the established artist and the estate artist to blue chip. I would liken the emerging artists to being a new venture. And they operate, and their value creation is actually very different. It's the established artists, there is a very generally a robust indication of value because works may have sold at auction. And the secondary market, as we started talking about early in this, is really where that is the public record for value for an artist. And there are many sources where you can see or just go to the auction website and see how various artists, and generally they're more established or estate artists, have performed. It's a little more murky for emerging artists. And what I would say there is that big collectors that I've worked with generally will limit the amount they invest in a emerging artist. And I would say it's usually sub $20,000, but depending on the size of the work and the scale of the work, I mean, it could be under 5, it could be under 2. It just depends on the work and the artist and where they're situated. But I would say that anyone coming out the gate, and this is a point I tried to emphasize in the article, in the guidance, in the newsletter, was like act like you don't have any money at first. Like hold your wallet, try to get into this thing to kind of see what you like and what you want. And then, be stingy, not saying, and when I say being stingy, I'm not saying be stingy with the artist. What I'm saying is, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you need to go out and just throw the money around. That doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Because you can learn the market, be supportive of artists, pay a good price for their work that is commensurate with where you can see some appreciation, show an indication. And then what you do is, if there's someone you really love, don't just buy 1, buy 2, buy 3, buy 4 pieces, right? And because this is what happens, right? 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 5 years, 20 years, 10 years down the road, you want to now, or you need to pay for your kid to go to college, then maybe you sell 1 piece, but you still have 4 pieces. And that's the beauty of buying emerging artists early on. It is just like investing in a new venture.
Wow. I like how you paralleled that. A couple questions. I'm gonna do a rapid fire because we're getting short on time. Mel, this is going to be targeting towards you. It's around valuation. A lot of folks want to understand what are the resources, books, whatever you want to call it, that folks can understand the value of art to the extent available. And there's also a question around insuring, if you have any kind of quick tips around insuring art. And then the last question, if you can bundle this in there as well, this is probably a triplet. We had a question I was emailed in, which is, what if someone really loves a piece of art, but they just can't afford it? Are there any options for folks to be able to have a shot at that art, layaway plan, whatever you want to call it? Or do you pretty much just kind of write it off and say, hey, this wasn't meant for me. This wasn't in my cards right now.
Okay. So I think I'm actually going to answer the, last question first, around sort of like the financing options here. So I would say never be afraid, and Lewis, correct me if I'm wrong, never be afraid to ask a dealer or a gallerist if you can purchase a work with, special payment terms. I don't know if you want to call it layaway per se, but I would say special payment terms. Typically, most galleries will allow you to actually pay in installments. But again, if you've taken the time to develop the relationship with them and you've demonstrated your passion and seriousness about owning a particular work of art, walking in the door and saying, like, I want to buy this, can I pay it off? And, over the course of 6 months, probably isn't going to cut it. But this is not layaway where you have months to pay on it. You usually be able to pay in 2 and 3 installments within maybe a 2 or 3 month period, which is kind of generous in the art world, I think. Alternatively, you can sometimes access funds through a third-party financing platform. There are some platforms out there. One of the more popular ones is called Art Money, and they allow you to basically secure a loan on the spot when working with one of their exclusive gallery partners. So you have to go on Art Money, find out who they work with, go into one of their galleries, and you can purchase the work directly through the gallery. But once you're actually approved for the loan kind of on the spot, they pay for the work in full up front, and then you pay them back in installments, but you get a much larger window to pay it back. I think it's usually a 10 or 12 month period. So for some other people, that might be more feasible to do, to sort of finance your loan in that way. As far as literature, books are concerned, that sort of thing.
Around
There are
valuation specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, about valuation. So there is a book called The $12 Million Stuffed Shark. It's about the economics of contemporary art. So I would certainly recommend that as a place to start in terms of understanding valuation. There's another book called Talking Prices. And that one is also about contemporary art, but it talks a lot about just pricing work generally. I think there's also a book called The Value of Art, Money, Power, Beauty. There's a book by Charles Moore, who's a very, very notable Black art collector and New York City-based author, and it's called The Black Market. And there is not only a blueprint of how to start your own collection, but we'll also talk about valuation as well. The question around insurance, I'm actually going to toss over to Louis, because you are buying and selling every day, specifically to collectors. So you can probably speak a bit more to how they are insuring and protecting their works in that sense.
I'm going to make that one brief. It's just that, once you start to amass works and you believe there's significant value there, you should have a very good record and inventory of the art that you have, but you should also have appraisals. I think that was a part of the question in there. And there are a number of appraising resources I could support and help you on that, or you can Google an appraiser. You probably want an appraiser that specializes in the type of work that you have, though. So, just realize that there's something to that. And then the last piece is that for insurance, don't just assume that your homeowners or renters insurance is going to cover this thing. You probably need a special rider when you start to have work that is of significant value, and that is and that doesn't come at a price that is exorbitant, but it's one that will give you the coverage that you need if there's damage or a problem.
And I just want to follow up on one thing that Louis just said. Louis, thank you for specifically calling out the need to have work appraised, particularly when you're buying in the secondary market. And if there's, you always want to make sure that you're purchasing a work that is authentic. You need to understand the provenance of the work, so where the work has come from, whose hands it's passed through, the condition of that work, and having someone who is knowledgeable and skilled at being able to make those determinations based on their expertise level is going to be critical to making sure that you're purchasing a work that is actually worth the value that you're being charged for it.
And it's not a fake.
And it's authentic. Exactly. Yeah. It's real.
Yeah.
Cool. Do we have time for one more, Brandon, or?
Let's do it.
One more. Want to know about, does the size or the scale of the work matter from an investment standpoint? Like the physical size?
There are paintings that are really small that can sell in the auction market, in the secondary market, for a lot of money. There's just because of our relationship with space these days, and everyone has big homes and a lot of wall space, there seems to be, a push towards bigger works, but bigger doesn't necessarily mean more value.
All right, I think we are up with time. Brandon, do you want to close out?
I will. This is the end of this one session. This is not the end of conversations around art, conversations around supporting Black creators, finding your passion and finding how you connect. So please join the Gravy Slack group, join the Gravy ecosystem, support Black in Home, Stephanie's incredible platform that's really highlighting incredible creative interior design out of the Black community around the world. Louis, of course, we mentioned Long Gallery Harlem. Please stop by if you're in New York, support Louis as well. And Melanie, if there's anything on your end on the artsy front that we can support you, or even maybe reach out to you for some art consultation, we are happy to offer that up. I'm going to ask Louis and Melanie to both kind of triage questions that may come that weren't answered here in our Slack group. So if you have any additional questions, please pop them up there. Lastly, I'll close by saying thank you for joining. Please stay connected to Gravy. We are all about creating access, transparency around what it takes to create wealth, and we talk about all investment areas. Art, of course, is a really special one for the culture. So this is just one of many pieces to come. So again, we have a newsletter. Sign up for that. We have a conversation series. This is one. There'll be many more to come, and we also have a Slack group as well, and also an investment group. So with that said, Louis, is there anything you want to throw out there at all about what you're working on, or do you want to save that for a later conversation?
Yeah, no, a couple really fast. June 12th, please come see the exhibition, physical exhibition at Long Gallery Harlem. It's from 2 to 5. Ron Noiseworthy's work. He also has a companion exhibition at Project for Empty Space in Newark. It's called Allegorical Spaces. I posted on it. Please go look at it. You want to see George and Wheezy and Thomas Jefferson's bedroom. That's what you're going to see there. I'm also working on raising money now for a fund called the Harlem Art Fund. And it's also a way to really allow investors to get a little closer to all aspects of this ecosystem, to have access to works potentially, but also to generate a return through the shared knowledge that I, as well as folks and experts that I'm working with, have.
Sounds great. And we'll definitely put more information as this materializes into the Gravy ecosystem. I want to give one last thank you to Steph for joining us in this collaboration. I also want to shout out Leslie SB behind the scenes, who did a lot of work to put this together. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Louis. And for the audience, much more to come. Thank you for attending, and we will see you again in Wealth. Take care. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.